They called him the Lionheart, a king forged in blood, baptized by battle, hailed as the embodiment of Christian chivalry. Songs were sung in his name, legends carved into the stone of European courts. Richard I of England, the Crusader king, was the living myth of holy war. But like all myths, beneath the shining armor lies shadow. And this story isn't the one you were taught in school. Because what if I told you that one of Richard the Lionheart's greatest military victories never really happened? That it was a lie, crafted not on the battlefield, but behind closed doors, whispered through the corridors of power, cemented in chronicles paid for by kings? To uncover the truth, we must go back, not to the courts of England, but to the blistering heat of the Holy Land. The year is 1191. The Third Crusade is in full swing. Jerusalem is in Muslim hands. Saladin, the Sultan warrior, is the scourge of Christendom. And Richard, he's just arrived, armed with steel, vengeance, and something more dangerous than both, a legacy to protect. His first target is the port city of Acre, a place that had been under siege long before Richard arrived. The Crusaders had been bleeding outside its walls for nearly 2 years. Disease, starvation, infighting, Acre had become a graveyard for the faithful. But Richard, charismatic and cruel in equal measure, swept in like a storm, and he did what others could not. The city fell, and then came the moment that history books quietly skim over. Richard had taken nearly 3,000 Muslim prisoners, including women and children, promising to release them in exchange for Saladin's surrender of Christian prisoners and the True Cross. But weeks passed, negotiations stalled, and Richard grew impatient, so he ordered them all executed. Every last one. Their blood ran in rivers outside the walls of Acre, as Saladin watched helplessly from a distance. To Richard, it was not cruelty, it was strategy, a message written in gore. Yet, despite this display of ruthless efficiency, something began to slip. Richard's campaign to take Jerusalem, the crown jewel of the Crusades, was failing. Saladin's forces, though bruised, were unbroken. Desert heat sapped the strength of every knight and horse. Supplies dwindled. The Crusader army fractured along national lines. Germans here, French there. Internal politics poisoned unity, and Richard never reached Jerusalem. 3 times he marched toward the holy city. 3 times he turned back. It was an unbearable reality. For a man who had crossed continents, sacrificed his health, his treasure, and the trust of his people, returning home empty-handed was unthinkable, unforgivable. And so, a new campaign began, not of swords, but of stories. The chroniclers, those trusted scribes who shaped the memories of kings, were mobilized. Some were devout followers, others were simply paid well, and the tale they wove was dazzling. According to them, Richard had outsmarted Saladin at every turn. He won every battle. He struck fear into the hearts of infidels. He chose not to take Jerusalem not because he couldn't, but because he was wise enough to know that victory would be fleeting. He was a protector of pilgrims, a savior of Christendom, a lion among men. It was brilliant, and it was a lie. The truth, buried beneath embellished verses and heroic murals, is this: Richard the Lionheart never recaptured Jerusalem. Not once did his boots touch the holy stones he had sworn to reclaim. Instead, he signed a treaty with Saladin, a truce, one that allowed Christian pilgrims to safely visit the city, but left it firmly under Muslim control. It was diplomacy, pragmatic and necessary, but to the crusading spirit that had fueled Europe for decades, it was failure. So Richard lied, or rather, he allowed others to lie for him. He didn't correct the myths. He encouraged them. He funded them. He knew that history, like power, belongs to those who control the narrative. And what of his return to England? He never made it home, not directly. On his journey back, Richard was captured by Duke Leopold of Austria, an old enemy he had humiliated at Acre. For over a year, he was held prisoner in a dank German castle while his mother Eleanor of Aquitaine scrambled to gather a ransom that nearly bankrupted England. A king of Crusades reduced to a political bargaining chip. When Richard was finally released, He spent just a few short years in England before embarking on yet another war in France, where, in a petty siege over a minor castle, he was shot by a crossbow. Days later, he died from the wound. No martyr's death, no glorious final stand, just an infection in a battlefield camp. And Jerusalem, it remained in Muslim hands for nearly a century more. So why do we still revere Richard as a legendary Crusader king? Because we wanted to, because we needed heroes in our history, because lies, repeated long enough, become truth. The tale of Richard the Lionheart is not just the story of a man. It's the story of how empires construct legends to justify their failures, how truth can be twisted, buried beneath banners and hymns, until the lie becomes sacred. But sometimes, if you listen closely, history whispers its secrets. And now, you know one of them. The next time you hear the name Richard the Lionheart, remember this: victory is not always won on the battlefield. Sometimes, it's written with ink. And sometimes the greatest battles are the ones fought to protect a lie.